It's good.
Good Friday morning, friends, and welcome to the 100th episode of the Finding God in the Dark podcast. My name is Don,
My name is Jonathan.
and today we have chosen to discuss what is, by the American Film Institute, considered the best film of all time,
Yeah,
Citizen Kane. This is um, this is a profound film.
yeah, it is.
It really is. Now, for those of you who are not film buffs, I'm going to lay this right out the very beginning. We're going to give away the ending.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
So if you have not seen it and you don't want it to be spoiled, pause here, go watch it, and
yes.
come back.
It's
Um,
it's literally almost an 85-year-old movie. So
yeah,
you should at this point
yeah.
you should have watched it.
Came out in 1941. Yeah. So it's been around longer than most of us.
Yeah,
But yeah, let's where to start. Orson Welles, my understanding, wrote, directed, stars
yeah.
in.
It's actually the backstory to this movie is actually maybe just as interesting as the movie itself. William Randolph Hearst was kind of the archetype for the Kane character. Literally tried to kill this movie and then kill Orson Welles' career. He actually severely damaged Orson Welles' career. He never got the ability to make a movie outright again. He never got the ability to just kind of have a blank check like he had in this one. So that happened, and then also there's controversy about how much Orson Welles actually wrote this movie, whether he should get co-credit for writing it or if he should have no credit for writing it. So there's a lot of issues with this movie that
Yeah,
go beyond the movie itself. But
yeah,
yes, he was a major force, no question, behind this movie.
and yeah, as you said, it's loosely based
Yeah.
on William Randolph Hearst, but it is a fictionalization.
Hmm.
The basic premise of the story is a man is family inherits a gold mine.
Yeah.
The parents sign over his guardianship to another man,
Yeah.
and he becomes rich, becomes a newspaper magnate,
Yeah.
runs for governor,
Yeah.
um, is married and divorced twice,
Yeah.
dies alone.
Yes.
Okay. I've given you the basic plot line of the entire film.
Rise and fall of, greatness.
Yes.
The original,
And
yeah, the
I,
original script was called American. So that it tells you this idea of kind of the American ethos runs through this movie too.
um, you will, I understand why AFI calls it
Mhm.
the best film of all time. In our discussion right before we started recording, I think Jonathan really hit the nail on the head in saying the most impactful
Excellent.
film.
Yeah.
In that it changed the way movies were made.
Yes.
Um, it really did. With things like the depth of focus, where it used to be you were focusing on what they wanted you to pay attention to, whereas now they use these long lenses that
Yeah.
created like everything in the frame was in focus.
Yeah.
And so where they changed the focus was to change the window
Yeah.
and to zoom in or whatever. That was revolutionary. They used back screen projection for certain scenes where there were two characters in the scene. One was filmed and then projected on a screen behind.
Yeah.
Things like that made the movie making in this film revolutionary. The
Yeah.
story is one that you'll be kind of familiar with, but
Yeah.
again, it's also 85 years old, so
Yes. It,
it's been
yeah.
told again.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you don't by this time in your life know what Rosebud is,
We're spoiling.
which I want to say now, I said last week I had not seen the film prior to this week, but I did know just because of pop culture mythology, I did know that Rosebud was his childhood sled. I
Yes.
knew that.
Yeah.
I didn't know what the meaning of it was.
Yeah.
And I think that's and now we'll launch into the themes. That's a huge theme in this film,
Yeah.
is sort of that loss of childhood,
Loss of
that
identity.
a yearning to go back to a simpler life,
Yeah.
which Kane in the film, I think, pursues by trying to be loved by everyone.
Yeah.
Everything in his life is about, it's telling when his second wife, wants to leave, and he said, "How can you do this to me?"
Yeah.
To him, it was about him,
Yeah.
you know. Um, and so at the end, when his final word is Rosebud,
Yeah.
it just reflects, like, knowing that ahead of time. And I said this in a text, knowing that ahead of time, just to me, it cast this sad pall over the
Yeah.
entire film.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't know it going in, if you come into this film and you watch it and you don't know what Rosebud is, because they don't tell you until the final scene of the film.
Yeah.
Um, and you as the audience are the only ones that find out. That's kind of the whole plot of the film, is they're trying to find out what his last words meant.
Yeah.
And you find out at the end that what his last words really meant were, I've wasted my life.
Well, yeah,
You know?
it's really up for interpretation, right?
True. Yes,
They
true.
don't give you a bow on it and say they tell you that Rosebud, the thing that he's been talking, actually a couple times through the movie, he says Rosebud,
Hmm.
and at the end of his life, he says Rosebud. And they don't wrap it up though. You learn that the Rosebud is the sled, but then you have to figure out what that means. Why did he say it? Why did that moment touch so deep a nerve in him? All those kind of things. And you can take it different places, and that's one of the unique parts of this film too. At the time, most movies, and still today, most movies wrap everything up. They kind of tell you what it means, and this movie was just like, yeah, it's his sled. You can figure out you know, why that
And
matters.
I will say, at least for me, it felt like that on his deathbed, that utterance of Rosebud feels like him reflecting back to the last time in his life when he was truly happy,
Yeah, I think
you
that's
know?
fair. I think also, there's a really good American experience documentary about the fight between Hearst and Orson Welles about this movie.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, it's all you can find it on. It's PBS documentary. You can find it on YouTube for free. It's really interesting. But one of the things is Wells injected his own life story into the telling of Kane. So,
Mhm.
for example, Hearst didn't lose a parent, but Wells lost his mother, and
Right.
in this movie, he loses his mother. The Kane character loses his mother not through death, but through this idea that she didn't want him.
Right.
And, um, that idea of kind of fusing his own life into this story makes it, in a weird way, very autobiographical about
Mhm.
him. Um, but yeah, I think in a lot of ways, it's him struggling with love and the character struggling with the idea of being loved, and we both have children who were adopted. We both know that there's damage there when you lose a parent, and you lose that kind of foundational love from a birth parent.
Yeah.
There's wounds there that exist, and I think Wells is also struggling with his own issues, but this idea of the deep need to feel loved and feel connected and feel safe that can be lost when you're a child, and how that shapes your life from then on for the rest
Yeah.
of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it also, in a lot of ways, I think, and I think Wells was also commenting on this as well. It kind of forces us to examine our own preconceptions of wealth and power and celebrity,
Yeah,
and what it is that um, is going on underneath.
yeah, yeah.
Because you want to you you want to make I think we all make these presuppositions about, wealthy people or powerful people or,
Yeah.
celebrities or whatever, and we don't know their backstory, you know.
So, because this movie is such a huge thing, there are a lot of people that obviously have made videos or people have asked them about this movie. And so you can go down a rabbit hole and find different people talking about this movie.
Yep.
And I found President Trump talking about this movie.
Really
Yes, it's just a 2 minute clip. You can just put in Donald Trump. I didn't intend to, but it was just something that popped up
came
in
up.
my
Yeah.
YouTube algorithm. But he talks about, he said at one point, well, I do think that wealth distances you from other people because you become very suspicious of them. And I thought that was very fascinating. Not, we'll leave aside the thinking about Donald Trump,
Yeah,
but
the politics of it, sure.
I do think you see that in this movie. In fact, the Kane character at one point says, I could have essentially he says, I could have been a good person if it wasn't for the money.
If I wasn't rich, yeah.
Yeah. And again, that's a very Christian theme of being very suspicious and being very worried about how money will affect you.
Yeah.
you know, I tell my folks all the time, and some of them don't believe me, but it's true. Jesus talks about money more than anything else. And I think it's because there's this deep danger in it to isolate, to make you very suspicious, to have you focus on yourself. And you see all of that in this character, right? He is obsessed with himself. He's obsessed with protecting himself. He doesn't trust people. He doesn't open up. Doesn't allow himself to be vulnerable. And ultimately, all those things really keep him from having a wealthy life in a weird way.
Yeah. And in the end, it's interesting in that even with all of his wealth, he loses everything.
Yeah.
He loses both his wives. He loses his son in a car accident.
Yeah.
He ends up alone, surrounded by the things he's accumulated,
And
which
people,
is profoundly
yeah,
sad.
and people getting rid of it, right? I mean, literally, the last scene is them burning a bunch of stuff, including the sled.
Yeah.
So all of these things he's collected ultimately just get parceled out to people that don't really care.
Yeah. Yeah, it is it's a sad film. It really is a sad film.
It is.
Um what else do you want to say about this? Because I think that this is um there's so many layers of this, like the loss and the loneliness and the uh but what to me becomes really amazing is how Wells tells the story not just with the dialogue. In fact, the dialogue is very normal. It
Yeah,
doesn't feel like movie dialogue. It feels like conversational dialogue, right?
yeah. It's
And
it's very trimmed. Yeah,
yeah, and most of the storytelling about okay, so there's one scene and I believe it's in a bank, but I'm not sure. And they're talking to him about, well, your paper's going bankrupt and all that, and he's
yeah,
Wells' character Kane is right up in the scene and
yeah,
he is towering over the other two men.
yeah,
And it looks like the background is just this kind of normal thing. And then he walks towards the background and it turns out that the windows are gigantic
yeah,
and he gets much smaller as he
yeah,
walks to the back of the room. All of a
yeah.
sudden, like he is this small man. And just like if you have not seen this film or if you haven't seen it in a long time, watch it just for the camera angles and that visual storytelling
Yeah.
that speaks so much more loudly than the dialogue even does.
Yeah, it's a good example too. Is it's one of the first, at least an American film. It's one of the first montages, and he does a brilliant job of you see the disillusion of his first marriage, over maybe 2 minutes, and you see them simply setting up breakfast, talking, and
Hmm.
they are close together, lovingly looking at each other, and they get further and further away from each other, and their distance and their kind of facial expressions change, and within 2 minutes, oh, this marriage has ended. Like,
Yeah.
and it's just
Even to the point where they're both sitting at the table, a very long table,
yeah,
opposite ends,
yeah,
and he's reading his paper, the Inquirer,
yeah,
and she's reading his competitor's paper, the
yeah,
Chronicle.
yeah, yeah. And but in a very powerful way, this can be actually an interesting movie to have a current discussion about things in America right now. So
Oh yeah.
this movie is based on loosely based on Hearst, which was he was famous for what was called yellow journalism. He was
Hmm.
famous once for saying sending a reporter to Spain to investigate the stuff that was, or not in Spain, to Cuba to investigate what Spain was doing there. And one of the reporters said, "Nothing's happening." He said, "Give me the pictures. I'll make the war." And
Right.
he there's some argument you can make that he was a major reason we had the Spanish American War over Cuba and over Puerto Rico because of what he had created. And
Hmm.
so this idea of fake journalism, this idea of yellow journalism, this idea of shaping the story and not just reporting the facts, that of course can be a huge dialogue that we can have, right? About
Well,
about
you
how
know,
we use news media.
it's interesting because people say that history may not repeat itself, but it does rhyme.
Yeah.
And you can see, I mean, there are 100%. I'm sitting here watching it, and they're throwing out terms,
Yeah,
and particularly in the beginning of the film,
yeah,
where I'm going, this would play today. I hear this now.
yeah, yeah,
So, in that sense, the film has sort of this timeless quality to it.
yeah. And then like the idea of the false reality of the American dream, which is a huge part of this movie. This
Yeah.
idea that wealth and power and having more is going to make you happy and going to make you content and going to make you have a good life. And this movie is a deep counter to that.
Yeah. 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 I, I, I mean, I'm going to say, like, I feel a little embarrassed that I hadn't seen it before.
I was shocked. I was shocked.
Uh, um, but I'm thrilled I've seen it now. It's a film worth watching. I
Yeah,
mean, I don't know what else to say. There's only been a few films that we have done on this podcast
yeah,
when, we watch the film and then I go order it on Blu-ray.
yeah.
This is one of them.
Yeah, I already had a copy. I don't have it on Blu-ray, but I have it
Yeah.
on
Yeah, this is
DVD.
one of them now. Haven't ordered it yet, but it's in my Amazon wish list. So,
No, it's one of those movies that you can just see all the if you are willing to think through, oh, I bet they created this. So like I even thought about the fact that this is one of the first movies that I know of that uses the unreliable narrator trope, where you get different narrations of the story and they
mhm,
don't match up, and you have to figure out who am I going to believe,
right.
or the weird camera angles where things are shot from below, so that
Mhm.
or from weird angles, and you're like, oh, he probably was a part of why this was created or why people did this.
Yeah. Well, and one of those I know I think it's in the newspaper where it's shot below. The story said that they actually had to dig out the floor
Yes.
in
Yep.
order to shoot the angle that
Yeah.
Wells wanted,
Yeah.
and that normally a shot like that is done to make the character seem bigger.
Yeah.
And yet in this sense it is at Kane's downfall.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of the opposite end of that.
Yeah.
It's like the height that he's fallen from, basically.
Yeah.
Um, Again, the visual storytelling here is something that Look, I can't tell you how many times I've said, don't you don't have to tell me everything. You have to give me a big exposition,
Yeah,
right? Um, because I'm watching the movie, I'm paying attention,
yeah,
you know. But do tell me a good story.
yeah,
And this is really an exceptional story.
yes.
So I'm appreciative of that, even though I picked it. Thank me.
Thank you. Yeah.
But
Um,
what else do you want to say, John?
well, I don't know. To me, there's just a lot of interesting themes that as Christians we can kind of investigate and have a conversation about.
Yeah,
Trying to prove something to other people, and that's a major theme. In fact, there's some arguments that you can make that Hearst was going after Wells because he felt like he was um, basically undermining the talent of essentially the woman who was Marion Davies, which wasn't his second wife, but basically his long-term mistress. He basically had two families. He had his official family on the East Coast, and he had Marion Davies, who was an actress on the West Coast, and kind of he built his life with her. And the argument is he was mad about this film because they focused on her being an alcoholic. They made fun of her jigsaw puzzles that everybody kind of knew about, and then also, Rosebud might be a reference to a body part. He liked to refer to one of her body parts as a rosebud. And so he felt like that Wells was insulting this woman he loved dearly. So this idea, right, of he wanted to prove that she was talented to Wells and to other people. That's part of the reason, like he pushed her. One of the parts of the movie is that he pushes this second wife to be an opera singer when she really isn't that talented.
right.
And there is reason to believe that he also tried to push Davies to prove that she was talented. Well, this idea of trying to prove to other people, trying to prove to other people that you have talent or trying to prove to other people that you're of worth, that can really destroy you. This idea that I'm going to prove to other people my worth instead of recognizing your worth comes from God and isn't
Yeah,
defined or, can't be diminished by other people.
yeah. Yeah, that's powerful. I mean, I think you and I have probably gone through similar paths on this, particularly in ministry. I think as
Yeah.
clergy, you have this tendency to be people pleasers. You
Yes.
know, people want something, and you're like, well, that's my job. It's to make those things happen.
Yeah.
But sometimes you give too much of yourself away,
Yeah.
and then there's no like who am I in the process anymore.
Yeah.
Like you have to prove that you are worthy, but my self-worth isn't based in what I do.
Yeah.
It's not based in how well my church does or doesn't do. My self-worth is based in God's view of me,
Yeah.
and yeah, you're right. This yeah. Yeah, this film torches that idea,
Yeah.
in a number of times, really,
Yeah.
because you got two. I mean, look at the fact that he has a son
Yeah.
who appears in what one scene.
Yeah.
Like at the beginning of the film, you hear about in the newsreel segment. In the beginning of
Yeah.
the film, you hear about his wife and son died in a car accident,
Yeah.
right? And then you see the son in the car when the first wife is leaving him,
Yeah.
or before they go to confront the mistress.
Yeah.
And that's the only time you see the child, and he never talks about him
Yeah. Well, at the rally, at his
at
political
his
rally,
rally,
he
right?
waves to him. But you almost get a sense, again, you get this interesting sense of he basically treated his son the way that he had been hurt and how he'd been treated, right? Like this in the movie, this richer guy clearly wants a son. He basically adopts Kane by basically stealing him from the parents, or at least pressuring the parents to give him to him. And he clearly wanted Kane just as an object, right? I wanted a son. I want someone to raise.
The
And
status of having a child.
the status of having a child, right? And yet we only see Kane's son in the movie when he wants to use him as a prop. He's at the rally and I'm going to wave to him. You
Yeah,
know, you don't see this idea. You don't see him playing ball with him or teaching him, helping him with homework. You
right.
see him when he needs him as a prop. And so it's also this weird kind of conversation about how we tend to repeat the mistakes of our parents. We tend to, generation after generation, we tend to repeat. That's a theme you'll find in the Bible. This idea that sin tends to go out generation after generation. And we tend to interpret that weirdly, but really, I think all it means is we tend, as human beings, to repeat the mistakes of our parents and grandparents rather than trying to recognize them and going out of our way to break that cycle.
Yeah. I've put that into a form that I call you only know what you know,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You can you if for instance, sometimes we'll ask maybe you know someone who lives with an abusive spouse.
yeah,
Um, and you would ask, well, why would they stay with that person? Why do they continue to go back to that person? And then you find out that they were abused as a child. Well, if your parents abused you
yeah.
and your parents love you, then you've got to find someone who treats you the way your parents did. They
That's what
must
love
love
looks
you.
like. That's what love looks
That's
like. Yeah,
right. So you only know what you know.
yeah,
Um, and again, the perfect example, right? The sins of the father.
yeah. And
Um,
also a huge theme here, which is also the first of the deadly sins from Middle East, from uh, the medieval, Christian community came up with
mhm,
10 deadly sins or seven deadly sins. The first
seven.
one is always pride. And it's this idea, right, of we want to. I think I want to say it's Lewis that talks about C.S. Lewis that talks about the idea that the first sin is always trying to put ourselves in God's place and trying to judge all of life through our understanding and our the way we think it should be, and that's really what pride is about, is this
Yeah.
idea that I want to be able to sit in God's chair and make judgments about other people based on how I see the world. And again, you get that sense of uh, that happening throughout Kane's life. At the very beginning of the movie, he's very pro worker until he becomes overwhelmed with unions trying to get, their fair share, and then he's anti-union and wants to bust unions. So it's basically you're good as long as you help me, and you're bad when you don't help me.
Right. I think I'll refer to because you use the word I,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
I think the one of the best illustrations I've ever seen of that was years ago. And maybe I've mentioned this before, I don't know, but years ago, Duffy Robbins was the guest speaker at youth conference in Ocean City.
Yeah.
And he said, sin is when I take that word, S-I-N, and I capitalize the I.
Yeah.
I make me bigger than everything else.
Yeah.
And Boy Kane's brilliant at that.
Yeah. Yeah.
In this whole throughout this film makes himself bigger than everybody else.
Yeah.
And having said that, you all can see how one might draw parallels to current day.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Um, and again, I'm not going to get political here. It's not my job to get political. It's not our job to get political. That's you look, if you want to do that, we did a podcast, we did a live thing a year and a half ago. Go watch that. Uh, but but yeah, it's but that's challenging, right? Because there's you've got to find that fine line between self-preservation
Yep.
and then complete self-denial,
Yeah.
right? Obviously, Kane is far to one side of that.
Well, it's the whole idea of Paul talks about it, and I can't remember which letter, but this idea of dying to yourself so Christ may live in you.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right. So, we're getting into the last bits of our time here together.
Yeah.
Um, boy, so much can be said about this film.
Yeah,
Um,
I would really encourage people to watch it, of course, but also to do some like jumping into the backstory of the film because it's fascinating.
yeah, and I've done that a little bit. I watched it, I think, Tuesday night, and so the last day or so, we're recording on Thursday. The last day or so, I have been watching a lot of these like videos about the significance. Is this a masterpiece? That sort of
Yeah.
thing. And man, this film,
Yeah.
it really is. It's worth seeing, friends. In at least in my case, it's worth owning.
Yeah.
It's on my Amazon wish list. Um, so Citizen Kane, big thumbs up, obviously.
Yeah.
For next week, I'm not going to let the cat completely out of the bag, but we are going to have a special guest with us next week. And the film that they have chosen for us to watch is I don't know what year it came out, but feels like 2020 to me.
Yeah, it was
Um,
around COVID.
yeah, it was around COVID. I know it was a live stream type of film. It is Disney's Soul,
Yeah.
um, which is an adorable film.
Yeah.
I have seen it. I'm assuming you've seen it, John.
Yes. I watched it years
Um,
ago, of course.
but our guest has chosen that film for us to watch next week, and then whatever we watch the following week, John, that's going to be on you. Just
Okay.
so you know, I picked Kane, so you're up next. Um, and until next Friday, friends, keep on finding God in the dark. We'll see you all next week. Take care and God bless.
Bye.
Thanks again for watching the Finding God in the Dark podcast, friends. If you've made it here all the way to the end of the video, then obviously you find something that we're doing to be educational or informative, something valuable in this podcast. So we want to invite you to go ahead and share this with your friends. Hit the like button. Follow us for more of this. We publish every week at 10 a.m. on Friday mornings on YouTube. Shortly thereafter, you'll find us somewhere on Facebook. Until next Friday, keep on finding God in the dark. Thanks for watching. Bye now.